Happy Thursday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. We have things to talk about, like an update to our drought monitor and a better idea about those end of the weekend rain chances. But overall, we are going to be dealing with predominantly the same forecast each and every day. But before we get into all of that, you might have awoken at first light in the sky early this morning and caught an image like this. Logan Todd sent this in from Ivy, Georgia, which, if you're unfamiliar with the area, just outside of Gordon over in Wilkinson County. There was a thin line of clouds that appeared to kind of glow in the night sky, but this was during first light as the sun did begin to rise just before 7 a.m. It kind of looked a little bit weird, and many of you probably were puzzled if you saw this same image as you walked out the door. What this was is what we call noctilucent clouds. So it's kind of exactly like what it sounds like, nocturnally illuminated clouds when you start to get that sun angle at a very low level. So this typically happens right before sunrise, or really during the first light of sunrise, or in that last little bit of light that you see before the light goes away during sunset. Typically what these are just some thin wispy clouds. So we talk about cirrus clouds all the time, how those are so thin and wispy. That's essentially what this is. They're ice crystals that are higher up in the sky, but sometimes they can be attributed to a human impact it caused. So what this was this morning was actually courtesy of the SpaceX launch down in Cape Canaveral around 3 a.m. this morning. They did launch the Falcon 9 rocket up into the sky. And we have seen many people, our sister station down in Tampa, many of you might know the name Courtney Jacobazzi, also caught this image at first light in the sky all the way from St. Petersburg on the other side of Florida. Well, the winds are a bit gustier higher up in the atmosphere, and that's where these clouds can be present. So all of that rocket exhaust got blown all the way up here, hundreds of miles away, up into portions of central Georgia. So we got a very good glimpse of it with that first light in the night sky. Now taking a look at our Perry Sky Cam, which actually caught a very cool image of these clouds. Obviously you see it flash over to the interstate, but take a look at them appearing out of nowhere and a very, very distinctive kind of glow to those clouds. Sometimes they can appear a bit blue in nature, but this time it was more of just kind of a glowing silver color. I do apologize for turning the camera over, but we had a traffic and weather hit that I did have to get to early this morning. But then you can see how quick that rocket exhaust finally did dissipate out of the night sky. So it was nothing in the form of aliens or anything, but doing these time lapses on the sky cams, actually a pretty fun hobby I've come to learn. You can see, take a look at this, one of the planets or maybe just a star continuing to rise up into that night sky. And then of course, those beautiful colors on display as the sun does continue to rise. So that's what that was. If you were wondering about the weird cloud formations early this morning, it was from rocket lost exhaust hundreds of miles away down in Cape Canaveral that continued to trek pretty close to us here in central Georgia. But then that rocket exhaust did dissipate shortly after sunrise, and then those clouds are no more, of course, now. Now let's get into what you need to know as we head into the end of the work week. No real changes with your forecast. Now we're getting a bit of a better picture of the weekend as a whole. Saturday is looking completely dry as of right now, which is going to be a great thing for fall festivals, pumpkin patch trips, and of course the big one, going up to Athens to watch the Ole Miss Rebels come into town and watch the Georgia Bulldogs put a good old spanking on them. Then we will have a front moving in on Sunday in the morning hours. We'll try to get a better idea of when exactly those rain chances are and exactly how much rain we're going to be looking at, because we do have an updated drought monitor. And I'll just go and give you a bit of a tease. It definitely didn't improve in any areas. Here's the scene across the quad here in central Georgia. Like we were just talking about, anything in the way of that rocket exhaust is completely out of the sky now. So what we're left with is a very deep blue color in the sky, but it also has resulted in a pretty quick warm up. Temperatures in the low to mid 70s all across central Georgia. These temperatures were down in the 50s once again this morning. Some areas got as low as maybe 50 or 51 degrees. That would be Eastman and McRae. I'm looking at you two down there at 72 and 73 degrees now. So nearly a 20-degree increase already this morning, and we still have a little bit to go as we transition into the afternoon. But let's go ahead and grab that warmest temperature in central Georgia. That would go to Cordele and Rochelle, sitting at 76 degrees. How does that compare across the east and the southeastern United States? It's really more so just the southeastern United States now. We know that areas farther to the north will continue to be quite cool. Take a look at all that blue up there into areas of Pennsylvania all the way up into New England. The only other areas where we see any blue are going to be well over to the west, back into the Rocky Mountains, of course. So 76 here in central Georgia. It matches the temperature actually down in Jacksonville, but 79 is the warmest number we see. It's very pleasant to see no 80s on this current temperatures map for a change. 79 in Panama City, Orlando, down into New Orleans, and it doesn't look like anyone in Texas has quite reached that 79-degree mark. But that does make a bit more sense because the sun did rise a little bit later, areas farther over to the west. So, of course, they haven't warmed up like the rest of central Georgia, and Jackson, Mississippi, sitting at 78 degrees as well, just 1 degree shy of that warmest temperature here this Thursday morning. Dew point temperatures. This has been a bit of a talking point over the last couple of days. Some days you're maybe noticing some of that moisture in the air that maybe makes it feel a little bit more unbearable to be outside. But this is depicting finally what I was saying all morning long. We have a northeasterly breeze settling in, which we'll talk about how gusty those winds are in just one moment. But what that's doing, it is reinforcing our drier air. So there is no shade of light green whatsoever. The farther north and northeast that you travel, areas down towards the south and the southwest are still holding on to dew point temperatures somewhere around 60, maybe up into the mid 60s at the most, like Americus and Unadilla at 66 and 64 degrees. But we are going to continue to push that light green out of the picture. This afternoon and tomorrow afternoon is looking like a completely dry environment, which is good in terms of how it feels outside in the afternoon time frame, but not necessarily the best case because we are desperately searching for some rain. Here's a look at the humidity levels all across the southeast, and there you see it, the northeasterly breeze propelling that drier surface air, those drier surface dew points down into central Georgia. And what that's going to do is push all of this light green farther and farther over to the west until our front kicks into gear that's coming in at the end of the weekend. That will start to clash together with some of that light green, whatever available moisture is in the picture. So here's a look at your winds and your wind gusts. Gusts up to 15 miles per hour in Milledgeville. That's exactly what we were saying today. Northeasterly winds from 5 to maybe 15 miles per hour at the most. We'll see some occasional gusts that could get above that threshold, but overall, the breeze is a bit steady and very widespread. It is more widespread farther up to the north in central Georgia where you see these yellow shaded areas, but we are also seeing sustained winds, even up to 12 miles per hour, 13 miles per hour in areas like Macon, Cochran, and down to Dublin in Lawrence County. So a bit of a breezy start. Temperatures are still feeling mighty nice. Let's compare them to yesterday's almanac, where we climbed to a high temperature of 85 degrees. So once again in the mid 80s and a couple degrees above average. In fact, 6 degrees above average for this time of year and 6 degrees off the record high yesterday set back in 1970. That high temperature for yesterday, the record all time was 91 degrees. 51 for a morning low, so we continue to be just slightly below average for your morning low temperature, at least up here in Macon. Some areas probably didn't get it as low as that average low of 54 degrees. But very thankfully, we're not talking about 1987 temperatures. 33 degrees, that is 1 degree above freezing temperature. Hopefully we get well into December before we have to start talking about some 30s. But we could see a pretty quick cool down, especially as we go into the end of your 7-day forecast, past the very end of your 7-day forecast, where next week's front is actually looking to usher in the coldest air that we've seen so far in the fall season. So here's a look at the precipitation. Obviously, we didn't get any yesterday. Your departure of rain down to 3 inches flat above where we should be at this point of the year. So for the calendar year of 2025, we are above average. We've gotten our rainfall for the entire year, and we still have a pretty substantial cushion to undergo a dry stretch like we've been under. But as of recently, we just haven't seen too much rain over the last month and a half. In fact, there's maybe been about 3 or 4 days that we've actually recorded some noticeable or considerable rainfall totals. And even at that, they've only been upwards to about 1/4 of an inch of rainfall. Sunrise yesterday, 7:39 a.m. And we were talking about it yesterday, 7:01 p.m. was your sunset yesterday. Yesterday did mark the last time that the sun was going to set at 7 p.m. or past 7 p.m. as the sun will set tonight at 6:59 p.m. Now, we may have the tonight graphic and it will show you that the sun sets at 7 p.m. Overall, it's virtually the same time, but this is a good indication that our sunsets will get earlier and earlier. Your hours of daylight yesterday were just under 11.5 hours. I imagine it's down to about 11 hours and 21 minutes and probably about 40 or 50 seconds. We continue to see those hours of daylight slim down pretty substantially day by day. So the first date on here was yesterday, October 15th, and we already talked about those sunrise and sunset times, maybe 1 minute off or so. But the big thing that you need to turn your attention to now is in a little less than 2.5 weeks, November 2nd. Doesn't seem like a significant date other than the fact that it's the second day of the month of November. But notice your sunrise time. Now it's before 7 a.m., 6:53 a.m., and then your sunset will be before the 6 p.m. hour at 5:42 p.m. We'll have just under 11 hours of daylight on November 2nd. And you may ask, Alex, why for this change? And that is going to be because that's when we are getting into the end of daylight saving time. So we are going to fall back. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But first things first, let's talk about the shortest day of the calendar year in terms of hours of daylight. That goes to December 21st, which is the first day of winter, the winter solstice. That is getting into the coldest time of the year for us, at least temperature-wise, of course. But also in terms of daylight, those are going to be your shortest days here over the next couple of months. I imagine November, December, and January. You're going to have that sunset happen well into the 5 p.m. hour and well before the 6 p.m. hour. How about a 5:32 p.m. sunset, which isn't even our earliest sunset. That actually goes to December 1st, which it will be 5:27 p.m. That will be the earliest that the sun sets. Your sunrise at 7:33 in the morning. So getting back into that 7:30 territory, pretty usual sunrise time, but of course the sunset will be well earlier. So those are the important dates to go ahead and mark on your calendar. Obviously, this is probably already marked on your calendar as the first day of winter, but November 2nd, like I said, just over 2.5 weeks until you're going to have to move that clock back as you go into the 2 a.m. hour. So speaking of that, daylight saving time, once we hit the 2 a.m. hour in between that Saturday and Sunday night, your clock is not going to go to 2 p.m. It will go to 1:59, Can't get my times right when I'm looking at the clock right here. But once the clock goes from 1:59, it won't jump to 2 p.m. It's actually going to go all the way back to 1 a.m. And of course, that is falling back. So what does falling back means? It means we're going to sacrifice our later sunsets, which I imagine a lot of you are not too happy about, but you will get an extra hour of sleep. So that one night on the weekend coming up in about 2 weeks, you will get a little bit more of a refreshing feeling as you wake up on Sunday morning, and that's because you got an extra hour of sleep. So that official change, like I mentioned, happens at 1:59:59 a.m. You're going to get 1 second before 2 a.m., but the clock is not going to hit 2 a.m. if you have one of those automatic clocks. If not, then your clock is going to continue to flow normally, and you're going to have to change it as you do wake up the next morning. So November 2nd, go ahead and be on the lookout for that. We are on October 16th this Thursday, so of course we are getting into the back half of the month of October now. And November 2nd, 2 days after Halloween. That's going to be a good mental reminder for you to go ahead and flip the clocks back. So a chilly morning, once again, transitioning into a dry and sunny afternoon. I know, stop me if you've heard me say that before. 82 for a high temperature. A little bit closer to average. We'll take what we can get. Average high is now down to 79 degrees. But hour by hour, we do see this warm up on the meteogram going up into those low 80s, just above the 80-degree mark during the warmest portion of the afternoon, 3, 4, and 5 p.m. And then we're very quick to return to the 70s. This is around the time that many of you are probably heading out to dinner this Thursday evening, already into the upper 70s. If you're like myself, you're probably finding yourself walking out of the restaurant around 8:30 at night like I did last night. It feels absolutely incredible. So you really get through this portion of the afternoon, which, lucky for most, 2, 3, 4 o'clock, many of you are still at work inside the air conditioning. But overall, these are some pleasant feeling temperatures. Outdoor plans in the form of maybe just going outside and eating your lunch. Maybe you have dinner plans with friends and family. And of course, as we go into the weekend, football is a big social activity. You're only going to have to get through that warmest portion of each afternoon before the temperatures really start to cool down, starting around 6 p.m. Here's your satellite and radar picture. No cloud cover, no rain. Surprise, surprise. And it's that way across the entire state of Georgia, but not just us in Georgia. South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, all the way west over to Mississippi, and northern Florida. So yes, it is a very dry atmosphere down here in the southeast United States. It will remain that way throughout today. You may see an occasional cloud or two, but overall it looks to be crystal clear on future view as we go into the evening hours tonight. We continue with the clear skies. Another gorgeous sunrise will be in store as we look off to the east. Can't find any cloud cover over here, so it does look like the sunrise will be mighty immaculate once again tomorrow. There is a bit of an exception. Friday, obviously, a little bit different than the last couple of days. We're going to have very dry air here at the surface, but a little bit higher up in the atmosphere, there obviously is a bit of moisture, and this is going to be in the form of those thin cirrus clouds, kind of like what we were talking about with that photo earlier in the stream. These may pass through as we go into the afternoon and the evening hours. They won't produce anything in the way of rain. They maybe will block a little bit of sunshine, but overall, I think it's still going to be a mostly sunny day for your Friday afternoon and evening plans, especially heading out to the gridiron to catch those Friday night lights here in central Georgia. Now let's go into Saturday morning. Maybe a few high-level clouds that are still left in the forecast. Saturday afternoon looks absolutely amazing once again for outdoor plans. And if you take a trip through Putnam County, go across I-20, you get up into this area just about 70 miles east of Atlanta. Athens, Georgia, your forecast also is looking nice and crystal clear for your Saturday afternoon as of right now. This is going to be around halftime of the game, I imagine, maybe late into the second quarter, especially if the Dogs get off to a slow start like they have been. But let's hope it's a fast-paced first half and the Dogs are putting up not only one, not only two, but a couple of touchdowns on the Rebels. Now let's go into the overnight hours into Sunday at 1 a.m. This is as far as future view will go as of right now. We'll start to see more clouds in the picture as you wake up on Sunday morning, and this will be a big reason for a slightly warmer morning low temperature as you walk outside on Sunday. But we also can get a good picture of some rain in the top left of your screen. That's going to be ahead of that frontal boundary that we've been talking about for quite some time. So the next 3 days, no rain chances worth worrying about. We'll actually get a bit of a downtick in your morning low temperatures closer to the 50-degree mark as opposed to the mid 50s and the upper 50s, even some values in the 60s that areas to the north and northeast walked out to today. 51 for a morning low tomorrow, 50 degrees as you walk outside on Saturday. It's going to be a very brisk start. Go ahead and make plans to have the light coat ready, maybe even some sweatpants or some pajama pants, and go out and make that morning drive to get your morning coffee, sit down, watch some college game day and such. 80 degrees for a high temperature on Friday. One of the coolest values we've seen so far during the work week, so we'll take what we can get back up into the low 80s as we go into Saturday. But for your grill cast tonight, once again, it is looking like green spatulas. No need to order in and no need to express caution because nothing weather-wise will be impacting you as you head out to the Traeger or head out to the Blackstone to cook your family a very nice meal. Here's a look at the future view humidity graphic, continuing to have that northeasterly breeze present throughout today, and we're going to hold on to virtually no humidity. Dew point temperatures in the low 50s, even the 40s as we go into your Friday. That very dry air is going to really dominate your forecast. And like I said, pushing whatever humidity is in the picture back over to the west. But once we transition into Saturday, you'll start to see that light green return over to the east just a little bit, even pockets of dark green as you go down to the southwest in Alabama, southern Mississippi, eastern Louisiana. It does look like our humidity tries to build back into the forecast as this front does come through, and you can actually get a good depiction now on this graphic of where the frontal boundary exactly is. It's going to be where these winds start clashing from one another. So the winds obviously coming in from the west behind this frontal boundary, and they're continuing to flow in a southerly direction right now. So if we can get that southerly component to the winds, that's going to usher in some more humid air ahead of the frontal boundary. But can we get that to happen here in central Georgia? Right now it looks like we have a bit of a southeasterly breeze by the time we go overnight into early Sunday morning. Doesn't quite look like that's going to be sufficient enough to maybe put some of the dark green in our area. And you may say, Alex, why do we want the dark green? Because that's the swampy air. That's what's going to make it feel a lot warmer. Well, Sunday, we're going to have our fair share of cloud cover, but hopefully we can get some rain. We have been searching for rain for quite some time. What do you need in order to sprout more widespread rain chances? You need that frontal boundary to interact with a lot of moisture ahead of it. You have a lot of lift ahead of these frontal boundaries that move through. So what's it doing? It's grabbing anything that it can at the surface and continuing to lift it. The more water, the more surface moisture that you have, that will continue to lead to that rising motion of it ahead of the frontal boundary, and that's what can lead to cloud formation. And the higher that moisture travels, the higher the cloud tops go, and the heavier that your rainfall does get. So here's a look at your morning low temperatures since we don't have anything, at least in your short-term forecast, to talk about, but we'll talk about your long-range models and how much rain we're expecting in just a moment. somewhere in the mid 50s, the low 50s. Overall, right there around average, maybe slightly above average. I do have more confidence in Sunday being the warmest morning low temperature that we have in the next 5 days, because that's when we will have cloud cover moving in overnight Saturday into Sunday. So the more clouds you have present in the morning, the slightly warmer morning low temperatures that you do have. So slightly above average of 53 this time of year. Your afternoon high temperatures, not really fluctuating much. It looks like we have a bit of cooler and drier air trying to enter the forecast as we go into Monday. Not necessarily some cooler air, but definitely some drier air. Take a look at your muggy meter. It's still depicting the same story that we've been talking about. That wedge setup right now ushering in really dry air for the day on Friday, but a steady rebound in the humidity as we go about Saturday, and eventually in the middle ground of this humid category on Sunday. We're going to hope that that can go up a little bit more into maybe some flashes of that dark green color, so there is more moisture to interact with as that frontal boundary transverses through central Georgia. But then after the front passes, take a look at that drop off. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we are dropping off the muggy meter completely. Maybe some dew point temperatures that get down into the 30s here in central Georgia, but that's really going to limit your rain chances as we go into the beginning of next week. So here's 9 a.m. on Sunday. We'll talk about how much rain both of these models are showing. And there is a little bit of better agreement amongst the GFS and the Euro than what we were seeing this morning. But take a look at what happens as we progress into the afternoon. European has rain chances holding pretty steady, but obviously there's a lot of a lighter blue shade as opposed to the darker blues that you see up to the north. The rain chances up to the north are going to be greater than what we see down here in the state of Georgia, and the GFS now falling a little bit behind the timing of what the European has. And these green shades actually breaking apart as this front moves through central Georgia. This just only looks like a couple of spotty light showers, but the heavier rainfall is definitely going to be up into portions of Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, and Northern Carolina. And now we go into Sunday evening, 10 p.m. A few spotty sprinkles that may remain. Otherwise, those conditions will clear out as that drier and maybe slightly cooler air does usher in for the afternoon on Monday. Any plans that you do have for the beginning of the new work week next week, still looking good to go. Maybe a few clouds by the time we go into Tuesday, but later Tuesday into Wednesday. Take a look at this. Another frontal boundary starting to move through, and this is really depicted by mainly just the cloud cover. This is a moisture-starved atmosphere as we go into the midweek next week that we were just showing you with that drop-off of the dew point temperatures in between Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week. So obviously there's not a lot of moisture in the air to work with, so this frontal boundary may not send us any rain chances at all. I have a few very tiny rain chances given that we're so far out as of right now, but this frontal boundary is going to be the most potent, and we're going to notice the most significantly cooler and drier air of the fall season after this passes. Sometime early on Wednesday is looking like the timing right now, and then as we go into Wednesday evening, maybe a few clouds there. We go all the way to Thursday, still no rain chances. The GFS, yes, has a cluster of rain trying to move over towards the east from the west, but that's just what one model says. When you get into this portion of the long-range models, the very end of them, 7 days out in the future, that's where your forecast uncertainty gets exponentially less in nature. So here's a look at your future view rainfall graphic. These green shades are not too much rain whatsoever, but we're zooming in on this, not necessarily focusing as much on the totals. We are still focusing on them, but this gives us a really good depiction of what time these long-range models have the rain entering. So it looks like late morning hours on Sunday, according to the GFS. So that green shade that we were just talking about, and the rainfall totals are not too impressive. But this is not the best resolution model as of right now. These are these global models that can't really depict what's going to happen at a local scale, but maybe a couple tenths of an inch of rain. Right now, the guidance by the National Weather Service is giving central Georgia really the potential up to about a quarter of an inch of rain, but most areas are probably going to fall short of that. Well, the European is a bit of a higher resolution model, and it has rain chances moving in as early as 8 or 9 a.m. on Sunday. So that would pertain to the morning commute, say out to church. Maybe if you have any travel plans on Sunday morning, it does look like rain starts to make its entrance. And after that front passes through, take a look at that. It's still not very impressive. A couple tenths of an inch of rain, some isolated pockets that could get up to, say, a half inch of rain, maybe an inch of rain at the very most, but it still does not look like these totals are going to put a significant dent in our drought monitor. And speaking of that drought monitor, it is going to look pretty similar. We didn't see actually too much change on this, which is not a bad thing. I was thinking we were going to see a moderate drought expand a lot farther, but what we can see, and the biggest depiction of the change, is actually this area of severe drought. It is more widespread over to the west. It now encompasses most of Upson County, all of Pike County right here, creeping into Lamar County, and then western Taylor County. That's where we start to see portions of that severe drought, which is a step above moderate drought conditions. We also see a moderate drought creeping in to portions of southwest Crisp County. We see a moderate drought or severe drought over here to the east of us, but most of central Georgia does find themselves still in abnormally dry conditions, which is not a bad thing. That just means it's been quite a while without some rain. Once you started to get into the categories that actually have drought by them, that's where you're looking at more substantial impacts, that really crunchy grass. So my best piece of advice, try to water anything in the way of your grass, in the way of any backyard plants, flowers, and anything in the way of maybe some veggies that you're growing in your backyard garden. Try to water those plants in the early morning hours and in the evening hours, where you're limiting the amount of evaporation that can occur. When you water those in the early morning hours, obviously it's not quite sunrise just yet, and even the first hour or so of sunrise, you don't quite have the sun angle. You still have plenty of areas of shade. Sun's got to get higher up in the sky before it can reach all those areas that don't necessarily, or all those areas that are close to maybe the side of your house, maybe the side of a backyard shed or such. Once you get the cloud or the sun directly on top of you, that's going to lead to more evaporation. So try to water those in the early morning hours so we're not leading to too much evaporation. In the evening hours, of course, the sun will begin to set, and that's where you're going to start to receive less sunlight during the overnight hours to really just take that water that you just put on your plants and create that rising motion back up into the atmosphere. Other than that, maybe water your plants, throw a little bit of mulch on top of them. That's going to help the soil retain anything in the way of that water. But otherwise, just continue to be cautious and heed any alerts or warnings that the drought monitor, the National Weather Service does give us. As we do have very dry conditions, we are a very rain-starved atmosphere and soil surface. As we get into maybe some windier days like we've had over the last couple of weeks, it could result in, say, maybe some fire danger statements as we're now heading into a much drier time of the year. Here's a look at your tropics outlook. Yep, there's nothing out there. So we had Tropical Storm Lorenzo for quite some time. That dissipated as of later yesterday. So there's no activity expected within the next 7 days down in the tropics, but something we will continue to keep a close eye on are going to be maybe some clusters of this cloud cover or maybe a tropical wave that is yet to really move off the west coast of Africa. There are a lot of long-range models, 300-hour models that are 300 hours out into the future. That's getting to about 2 weeks that are trying to say, hey, something's going to pop up in the Caribbean. It could move up into the Gulf. That is anything from certain. You don't know what you're going to eat for breakfast in 2 weeks. So it's the same way with this weather when you're trying to forecast it about 2 weeks out in advance. It's something, of course, we're keeping an eye on as we're now heading into the really last portion of hurricane season. After we get out of the month of October, I don't really have much confidence in much tropical activity besides maybe a named storm or two that doesn't really have the warm sea surface temperatures that, say, a storm in August would have. But there's nothing to worry about over the next week, even going into the next 2 weeks as of right now. If we get a potential area of development, you will be the first to know from the weather team here, and obviously we'll be keeping a close eye on it with all these long-range models trying to say, hey, it might get a little bit close to our neck of the woods, but there's no sign of any of that right now and no need to fret. And taking a look at your hurricane frequency, running out of time to hit our averages and see anything more in the way of named storms. We have this last little peak just before October 20th, which is kind of right now in this time period, October 16th. Then the frequency really drops off a cliff. As we go into November, we really don't see too many named storms or especially even hurricanes. Obviously, whatever forms is more likely going to be tropical depression or a tropical storm and not very likely strengthen into hurricane status. So each afternoon feeling virtually the same. Sunday has the potential to be a bit of a gloomy and dreary day. I would have plans to keep the raincoat handy if you have any outdoor plans on Sunday, but if not, I would advise making them for Friday and Saturday when the conditions are a lot more suitable. A minuscule rain chance for Tuesday into Wednesday next week, courtesy of that secondary frontal boundary, and then you can already start to see the temperature drop 83 down to 78 as we go into Wednesday, and a lot of the models are hitting at mid to upper 40s as you wake up on Thursday. Definitely something to look forward to if you're a fan of the fall. That'll do it for your extended forecast today. Tune back in at 11 a.m. tomorrow for another look at it.